From MTN, the Montana Television Network, this is Face the State.
Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday morning for Face the State. I'm Chet Layman from the Bozeman branch of the Montana Television Network. Joining us this morning, our special guest, Heather White from Yellowstone Forever. Yellowstone Forever, a fairly new name, but certainly not new work going on. Heather, first off, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about Yellowstone Forever. First and foremost, what is the mission of this group? What are you all about?
Well, the mission of Yellowstone Forever is to partner with the National Park Service to support Yellowstone, the world's first national park. We're the official nonprofit partner, so we provide critical fundraising for projects that the park needs and also education and engagement for visitors. Of course, we had 4.2 million visits this year alone in 2016. So it's a big task, but also something we're very excited about.
I think a lot of people, if they're not familiar with that, would be surprised to hear that you're doing fundraising and things like that. And I think that gets lost in the mix. Yellowstone National Park is a part of the Department of the Interior, the National Park Service, and it is a government agency that nearly comes close to being able to do what they do. But a lot of what happens in Yellowstone, those 4.2 million visitors, what they see there, are credited to your organization, what you're able to make happen there. I think of the work that's going on right now at the canyon and those kind of things. So let's talk about how that works with the federal agency, the private fundraising that comes with that.
So the public-private partnership is essential because, as you know, the budgets for Interior constantly are shrinking. And so we really come in and provide the margin of excellence for the visitor educational experience, but also for critical projects like you mentioned, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, the trail maintenance program. We want to make sure that those trails are safe, they're upgraded. We're also working on a new youth campus in Yellowstone where the Expedition Yellowstone happens from 4th to 8th graders. We also will have our Youth Conservation Corps at this Yellowstone Youth Center. We're excited about a new construction, a new building. It's actually not just going to be LEED, it's going to be a living building, which is kind of, if you think about LEED 2.0. So the idea is that the structure itself will be integrated into the ecosystem, but also provide an opportunity for students to learn through the building itself about the park and the park environment. So those are a couple of the projects that we work on. And maybe kind of stepping back, Chet, I should probably explain that Yellowstone Forever just launched. We just launched in the last couple of weeks as a result of a merger between Yellowstone Association and Yellowstone Park Foundation.
Yeah, I think it's important to go back and do maybe a little history lesson here, because I think people are going to go, that sounds really familiar. Weren't there groups doing that? Isn't there a building in Gardner dedicated to some of that? The answer to those questions is yes, but let's go back. Yellowstone Association, founded in 1933, I think if my research is there. Let's talk about what the work of the Yellowstone Association was.
So Yellowstone Association, you're absolutely right, created in 1933. It was a cooperating association of the park. It operates 12 bookstores, including that bookstore right when you land in Bozeman. You'll see Destination Yellowstone. Now it's the Yellowstone Forever store. So there's 12 educational bookstores throughout the park. There are also incredible classes that are offered through what was then the Yellowstone Association Institute. Now it's the Yellowstone Forever Institute, that people can take on everything from the waterfalls of Yellowstone to the wildflowers of Yellowstone to go camping and tracking predators. There's just all kinds of wonderful opportunities that Yellowstone Association has provided, mainly for education and engagement. And so what's happened, though, is that the Yellowstone Association and the Yellowstone Park Foundation have come together. The Park Foundation, on the other hand, was the official fundraising partner for the park and made that critical difference in making sure that park projects were completed, but also research on wolves recovery, research on native trout restoration, for example. And the two boards of these organizations said, hey, wait a second, why don't we come together? And we had the full support of Yellowstone National Park and the superintendent, Dan Wank, to say, rather than having two entities operating with very similar missions, the idea is that 1 + 1 = 5 here. Let's combine our resources and really make sure that we can engage this next generation of visitors, but also engage them through philanthropy as well.
I think what's really interesting to me is your role in that. I think a lot of people would see the Yellowstone Association and the foundation merging together, taking the leadership of some of that, and that has very well happened, but you're coming from outside that. You don't have preconceived association notices, you don't have anything to do with the foundation per se. You come in here. What brings Heather to this? What was the intrigue for you to come in and say, yeah, I'd like to take over this new being and see where we can go with it?
Oh, Chet, thank you for asking that question. It's such a great question. This is a dream job for anyone who loves conservation and public lands, to have the opportunity to be the first president and CEO of an organization that supports the world's first national park. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than that. My background is in conservation and public lands. I studied conservation biology at the University of Virginia. I then studied in New Zealand and really decided that conservation biology was my passion, but that law school is where I wanted to go. And after spending lots of time in law firms and working on Capitol Hill and in advocacy, I knew that environmental education is really what we needed to make sure that this conservation ethic is carried on to the next generation. I worked at National Wildlife Federation, and then I ran an organization in DC called Environmental Working Group. But when I got a call from the recruiter that said, hey, there's this opportunity, I thought, I have to, it's Yellowstone.
And I am as jealous as any person watching this morning about
Chet.
that position, to be able to be a part of that. I think it must be exciting for you to be able to look at since 1933, the work that the association has been doing, and doing a lot of it on their own, because the foundation was not formed until 1996. So there's a whole, decades worth of work going on in there. But all of that work, the part that's exciting for me is the work that you're doing with the young people. And I think that's an exciting thing, because as we're looking at the future of Yellowstone National Park, it isn't going to be my age group. We're here now and we're going to do what we can. It's going to be those young people. How do you see the future going with that, with Yellowstone Forever?
Well, it's critical. It's critical to the new organization. We'll be focusing on new audiences, especially youth. We'll also be looking at technology, which is part of that connection to youth, and also thinking about partners as well. Are there opportunities for us to work with the National Boys and Girls Club? Can we do more with the Scouts, for example? So those are kind of the opportunities on the horizon that I look forward to. I think one of the big issues that not only the park faces, but just our next generation faces, is how do we use technology to get them excited about conservation, but also provide them those opportunities to unplug. We have wonderful programs that we offer for teachers and for school groups to come experience Yellowstone on our Overlook campus in the Gardner office. We have all these terrific classes through the Yellowstone Forever Institute. We know education is the way, but one of the things I would like for us to do with Yellowstone Forever is really take Yellowstone out into the world. And technology is a great way to do that, because not everybody can come here. But one of the things that Henry George said, even before the National Park System was created and before Yellowstone was created, the idea that these public lands exists is really important to our culture and to a consciousness of freedom. And so I think it's important that we make sure that these incredible stories in Yellowstone that we use, whether online courses or more better use of video and storytelling, and taking them out into the world, not necessarily bringing more people here. And that's how we have to figure out the right way to do it. And one of the things I'm looking forward to learning from you, Chet, about storytelling. We need to do a better job of storytelling. We also need to hear from kids. How do we talk to them?
I think the part that's going to be the challenge, you talk about not necessarily bringing people here. People are coming. 4.2 million. I don't think those numbers are going to start going downhill anytime soon. The work that you're going to have to do at Yellowstone Forever is going to have to work in conjunction with that. You're going to work with Superintendent Wing. Where do you see that going? Because Yellowstone Park is vast. It's beautiful and it's wonderful to experience, and I think everybody should have a chance to do that. But you can't all come this summer. How do you make that work?
Well, it's a big challenge for the park. 2.2 million acres, as you know. The Centennial, I think, fortunately generated so much interest in the park. And actually, in 5 years, we're going to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone. So that's something that we're working towards. We are actually leveraging corporate partners to try to help the park come in and think through mobility. So one of the corporate partners we have is Michelin North America, and they have provided funding and also relationships with different contractors to start that conversation with the park about how do we move people through the park. That's not for Yellowstone Forever to decide, but we can provide resources for that important discussion, whether it's reservations, whether it's some type of transportation system. That is something that the park is going to have to deal with for sure. In the interim, we can do a good job of taking these experiences, whether it be learning about Mammoth Hot Springs and the microbes there, or telling the story of the wolf recovery or the bison recovery, and bringing that out into the world through technology.
I think it's interesting you're talking about that. My earliest memories of Yellowstone National Park, I'll be honest with you, was a Viewmaster of Old Faithful and the big bison head on there. So the technology has always been, I grew up in eastern Nevada. I wasn't anywhere near the park, but that was my first experience with that. Technology is so much more you can 3D fly through parts of it and things like that and give an experience for some of those things, but people still need to be able to see that. So I'm excited to hear that there's work in place to be able to make it still so everybody that wants to can walk a boardwalk and can see it and hear it and smell it and taste it and all of that. I think it's interesting from your point of view because now you have the resources of the Yellowstone Association and the education and all the background with all of that and all the resources of the park, plus the fundraising effort on that. So you are sitting in a really unique opportunity as we look to the future of Yellowstone National Park. That's got to be kind of exciting for you to be a part of that, looking how are we going to manage people, how are we going to get them into the park, and how are they going to be able to share what we love so much about it.
Oh, it's absolutely exciting. That's such a great way to frame it, Chet. It is. And I think one of the things that we've said at Yellowstone Forever is that our view is that education is philanthropy and philanthropy is education. And what we mean by that is when you educate someone about the experience, what they're seeing, help them kind of decode the geology, help them understand the importance of the bison recovery, help them know that no, it's not an antelope, it's a pronghorn, that they can then have a deeper connection. And that connection can spark an interest in them seeing themselves as stewards to care for the park. And then they can go to that next level of engagement to contribute to the park. And they contribute to philanthropy by donating their time or their financial resources. At the same time, that financial resources and that donation builds upon itself and creates more opportunities for education. So education is philanthropy, philanthropy is education. And philanthropy is one of those big words where I think a lot of people think the Carnegies or the Mellons, but what we really mean is that every dollar can really make a significant difference to Yellowstone and the needs that it has.
I love that you put the Laymans into the mix with the Carnegies and the Mellons. I've never been on that list before, so thank you for doing that.
Right.
I think some of the philanthropy, though, that we have to recognize, and you're a part of it, your organization, you have that big building in Gardner. There's other buildings all the way around Gardner and Yellowstone and West Yellowstone and Cody and those other communities. That's some of the philanthropy that's going to have to be included in some of that too, as you're bringing those people in here. That's good news for those communities as well. It's good news for Yellowstone, but it's got to be managed. How do you see that working forward?
I think it's a critical part of the success of Yellowstone Forever. One of the things I've said to our team and said to the just tremendous boards of directors that have come together into one, they're incredible visionaries. I've said to them that this is a national conservation organization and we will have national talent that reflects this mission of preserving the world's first national park. That said, it's very important for us to have strong relationships with the gateway communities because with this influx of visitors and with the recognition of the park as a place that it's on many people's bucket lists, right? Really, before I leave this earth, I want to see Old Faithful, or I want to see Grand Prismatic Spring, or I want to spend time in Little America, or I want to see the wolves. I mean, many people, that is part of what they want to do. Our job is to make sure that there are opportunities for the gateway communities to really enjoy that. So one of the things that, for example, I had a great meeting in Gardner recently where several of the leaders said, hey, could we have some of our pamphlets about what the local museums are or different stops people can make as they go down from Bozeman through Paradise Valley to Gardner. I mean, there's a reason it's called Paradise Valley, and it's not just the beauty. There's a lot of history, a lot of culture, wonderful little cafes and places for people to stop along the way. So I think that's an important role that we'll have if we think about our ambassadors in these bookstores talking about the gateway communities. The other thing as part of the launch of the organization is that we are trying to connect with the public libraries. So we're going to donate a new book by Tom Murphy, who I know you know well, phenomenal photographer here in the Yellowstone area, and Bruce Falk, who's a professor at the University of Illinois, have put together a book on Mammoth Hot Springs. And they call it The Art of Science, and it's unlocking the secrets of the universe. And this book is about the microbes of Mammoth Hot Springs, and NASA has actually funded this research and thinks that these microbes may actually help us determine whether or not there's life on other planets. We're dedicating this amazing book to all, well, we're dedicating it to the future scientists and future explorers of Yellowstone, but we're going to give it to all of the public libraries within 100 miles of the park.
That's phenomenal. I think that's great. The other part of it I like is the fact that you're talking about the microbes and things like that. I think sometimes people get lost in Yellowstone because Yellowstone is nothing more than grizzly bears, bison, wolves, and a couple of geothermal features. And that's, that's the stock and trade. That's the postcards, don't get me wrong. But there's so much else. I'm looking at some of the research that Yellowstone Forever is involved in. You're doing research on the mountain lion of the park. You're talking about the work that goes on with black bears, the forgotten bear of Yellowstone, which is a sad statement. I know from personal experience there's more than 300 species of birds in Yellowstone National Park. Do you think that's going to be a part of the education as well? You've got to bring, Yellowstone National Park is an ecosystem, and I don't think most people outside of the work that maybe you and I do and the people in Yellowstone understand what that means. Is that going to be the next part of it for Yellowstone Forever too, is remembering it's bigger than just the grizzly bear, which is a pretty phenomenal statement to make, but it is bigger than that.
It is, absolutely, and I think that's the exciting thing when you have that moment of engagement, when you use education as that tool for people to connect. They start peeling back the layers of what Yellowstone is and what it means to us. I mean, you were talking about the myriad of research and wildlife and biodiversity. There's also a tremendous amount of cultural significance to us as a nation, and also historic significance. So one of the projects that, in addition to the research that you outlined, Chet, thank you for all of your excellent research homework before our conversation, and passion for the park, which I know that you share. Also, we support the Historic Research Center, the HRC in Gardner, which is an incredible resource, and that's something that we want to highlight and uplift. It has original Thomas Moran sketches. Of course, he did the iconic picture of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone that hangs in the National American Art Museum. It has incredible artifacts from the 26 different tribes that have been connected with Yellowstone. So that's a whole nother area too. And one of the things that we find is, for many people, Yellowstone is a transformative experience. And everyone has a different story as like their connection to Yellowstone, but they want to keep coming back. And that's one of the things that, again, technology is part of it, but part of it is that visitor experience and making sure people see that there is this whole depth of Yellowstone. And I think you framed it well when you talked about just the microbes. We talk about the grizzly bears and the wolves, but the microbes need a little attention too.
Well, there's a few plants there. I know you have research going on some of the plant life that grows only around Yellowstone Lake, and it's in being threatened, at least because it's in a fairly popular place. The vast variety of research that's going on there. You touched on something earlier I want to explore a little bit more. You talked about this campus idea that's going on. That to me is really exciting. Again, I love bringing young people to Yellowstone. What you're talking about is literally being able to bring people to Yellowstone inside the park. Let's talk about that, that project that I know is in the works right now as well.
It's a huge project. As you know, constructing anything in Yellowstone is complicated and difficult, and then when you decide it's going to be a living building, it becomes even more complicated. We're excited though, because it'll be the first living building in a national park in the United States, and we think it's critical to the next generation to kind of think about design, think about their role in ecosystems, and combining science, anthropology, our culture all together in a living space. So it's a very, very ambitious project. It's going to be a significant campaign that we'll be part of, and asking people to contribute, again, whether it's $5 or $10 or $25, whatever is a significant gift to you, we'll be asking people to support it. We're really excited about partnering with the park to make sure that programming is inspiring for that next generation.
You mentioned living building, and I don't know if everybody understands what you really mean by that. This is a building that, other than the space it's taking up on the landscape, that's about it. We're not talking just about, energy efficient windows. We're not talking, there's so much that's being planned for this building. I mean, this building is going to be unlike anything that Yellowstone National Park or a lot of southwest Montana and northern Wyoming has ever seen.
Absolutely, and the building itself will be an instructional tool for the students that are there. They can learn about how the wastewater and gray water is dealt with and how it matches with the local ecosystem. The design itself will be very much part of the ecosystem, so it'll kind of almost, the sketches are pretty amazing. I won't say it disappears into the landscape, but you can see that it's really integrated and part of the landscape. And so we hope the whole experience of even being in that building is as inspiring as the lessons that they'll learn through the programming that they'll have through their experiences in the park.
Is there an age limit? Are you going to allow some old reporters to come in at time to time
You
and
bet.
do that?
There will be no age limit.
Well, that's great, an internship. Maybe I'll be off the air for a little while for that. I just think the opportunity that building brings is really unique, because I know, the history of Yellowstone National Park. You have the Old Faithful Inn, and you have the Lake Hotel, and you have what had been the Canyon Hotel. And because it was constructed massively in a really bad place, it's gone, and there's no evidence of that anymore. What you're talking about is being able to function in Yellowstone National Park completely without taking from Yellowstone National Park, if that's worded well. I think that not only sets the tone for Yellowstone, but I would think the National Park Service, and I think other places elsewhere. That's going to be exciting to be on the front edge of something like that.
It's so exciting, especially as we think about this 150th anniversary that's coming up of the park, to think that we are building the Old Faithful Inn of today. The inn, of course, for those of you who've been there, it's just breathtaking, but the whole experience was to try to take the outdoors inside, which is why you walk in and you can see all of these beams that are exposed. And I didn't realize until the 30s the bark was actually still on the beams. It was only removed because it was a fire hazard so much later. But that inspirational experience you have when you walk into the inn is definitely what we want to create in a more modern way before the 150th anniversary, if we can, for the Yellowstone Youth Campus.
If people are watching this, what do you hope they take away from this Yellowstone Forever idea? What do you hope the viewers sitting at home, having a cup of coffee here on Sunday morning, what do you hope they take with us?
I hope that they take with them the reality that they can contribute to Yellowstone and contribute time, resources, and bring their families, learn and support this iconic American experience. It's so important, of course, we know, to the economy of Montana and Wyoming, but more important than that, it's important to who we are as a country. Yellowstone.org is a wonderful resource where you can contribute your time, you can volunteer, you can contribute any of your resources for any particular project that sparks your interest, and you can also learn more about the Wonderland, as John Muir called it, of America in Yellowstone.
I think a lot of people hear you say the words volunteer. That opportunity has been here for a long time. You can go and, I don't want to say play, but you can be a part of Yellowstone National Park. You're not going to make a lot of money on it, but boy, I would think the benefits for an opportunity to do that. You have that. Yellowstone Forever has lots of opportunities.
We have
there.
that, and I love it. Actually, that might be our new campaign, Chet. Come and play.
Well,
Come play with us.
There you go.
We actually have a lot of people that are in their third act. They're retired professionals, and they thought, what should I do with my time? Let me spend my summer in Yellowstone or winter in Yellowstone. And they help us in our bookstores. They help us with interpretation, so people can kind of plan their trip and know what to do. They help people connect with rangers and different programs that the park itself is providing within the different areas where we operate. And so there's tremendous opportunities. We have another program that I think is fabulous. The Weekend Warriors is what we call them. They literally drive some 18, 19 hours sometimes to come to the Lamar Valley Buffalo Ranch, which is one of the other facilities where we have a lot of incredible programming, and they get it ready for the season, just volunteering their time, not glamorous work by any means, a lot of washing of sheets and a lot of sweeping, helping us with landscaping, et cetera, but it's really key to the success of the program.
And you're still in Yellowstone. You mentioned the ranch. I think the work that Yellowstone Forever has done over there, here's a building that has been around for a long time. This facility has been a part of the landscape longer, or almost as long as Yellowstone National Park has, but now, because of some efforts, fundraising from foundation, work of the association, now Yellowstone Forever, here's a building that is much more efficient. Instead of building a power plant out there, you have the ability to gather a pretty good resource in Yellowstone, the sun. You have the solar project there.
Solar project,
I
yes.
love that opportunity that you've developed there. Keep the building, but let's make it so it's going to work better
Right.
here in the 21st century.
Right, and that happened because a corporate partner, Toyota, said, hey, we'd love to do a pilot project with you. How can we help? How can we be beneficial? And so Toyota helped make those solar panels possible, and also, again, an educational opportunity for kids coming in about how we can have our own energy at the Lamar Valley Buffalo Ranch, which is fabulous. And of course, as you know, that was a key center of the bison recovery. And that's one of the things that I know, Chet, that you see when you see Yellowstone too, is that so much when you're talking about the environment and conservation is depressing. It's really depressing information. At Yellowstone, and I'm not saying there aren't threats to Yellowstone, we have the bison recovery, where it really started in Yellowstone. I mean, there used to be 60 million bison roaming North America, but now at least we have recovered that population in a significant way in Yellowstone National Park. We're at 4,900, which in fact may be too much for the park to contain, but we have several 100,000 bison across the country, almost all of them through the recovery efforts that happened in Yellowstone at the Lamar Valley Buffalo Ranch. Also, the wolf recovery is really significant. The grizzly recovery, no matter where someone may be on the delisting or listing of it, the fact is that we've seen the population really increase. So there's some amazing stories. We've also seen amazing stories with non-native fish. We've gotten non-native fish not all the way out. We still have a lot of work to do, but the fact that the West Slope cutthroat trout is actually flourishing again in Yellowstone. We're seeing bears for the first time in 15, 20 years actually fishing in streams now. So there's some really wonderful successes and positive, upbeat news that we hope to share with more people about what's possible.
And the thing that you've laid out for this that made it possible is everybody has their Yellowstone. Yellowstone is Old Faithful. Yellowstone is the bison. Yellowstone is the wolf. Yellowstone is the Norris Geyser Basin. It's the Grand Canyon. It's whatever your Yellowstone is. You've set it up so I can be a part of that. It doesn't matter if you want to talk about historic research of documents, or if you want to talk about Old Faithful, you want to talk about you folks at Yellowstone Forever made it really possible to either volunteer or help fund any one of those things that's your Yellowstone.
Absolutely, and that's important to us because we want you to be able to contribute with what works for you. So on our website, you can say historical research. On our website, you can say, I want to support wildlife and wildlife health. You can say, I really want to support youth and youth engagement. So that's important for us. The term that we use is donor-centric. We really want to have a partnership and a very strong partnership with the supporters of Yellowstone Forever. And there's so many, and I think we all see that there's an opportunity to grow even more for this critical resource and critical partnership that we have with the National Park Service.
The name itself, Yellowstone Forever, you feel pretty confident in that?
Well, it is on a caldera, super caldera, so I totally understand that. But one of the things I say in the launch video that we had, which is available on YouTube, is that I talk about my first experience in Yellowstone. I was 11, my dad took me on a cross-country tour, and I remember seeing Old Faithful for the first time, and it really was one of those experiences where I connected with something much larger than myself. I also talk about one of the things my grandfather always said is that we're all just passing through this beautiful earth, but that together we can make Yellowstone last forever.
I love the way you look at that. Old Faithful for you, it's the Norris Geyser Basin for me. Standing out on the end of that boardwalk, looking around at this place that you would see more likelihood if you were to venture to a different planet than you are here on Earth to be able to see that. That's the marker for me, is that. That's the beautiful thing about what Yellowstone Forever is doing, though. It's taking my story and your story and moving it forward.
Absolutely.
That's again Heather White joining us, the CEO and president of Yellowstone Forever, chatting a little bit about the park. Your facilities there in Gardner are open. Folks can come in and ask questions at any time. And you mentioned the bookstore as we wrap this up. Lots of opportunities to be involved. Head to the website.
Absolutely, Yellowstone.org. Please like us on Facebook. Share our information on Instagram. The photos, of course, are incredible and inspiring, and you'll get to see the wonder of Yellowstone by following us on social media. Please support us if you can with respect to either your time or donate to different park projects that you want to support. And know that the park is always first in our mind. The park priorities are our priorities, but that we can really make the critical difference for Yellowstone.
That's perfect. Again, Heather White, thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us for Face the State.
You've been watching Face the State, a presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network.